We need to build 1.5 million 3D printers in the next 10 years. Just us, just Slant 3D. But there were only 5 million printers built last year in 2025 on the whole planet. So how is this going to happen, and how did we as an industry end up here? Because the future of 3D printing is really informed by the past and its history, which is the history of plastic. So let's roll back the clock just a little bit. In 1872, John Wesley Hylett started manufacturing celluloid, the world's first thermoplastic. You heat it up, you shove it into a mold, and then you open it up and a thing falls out. What was the very first thing that he was making with that? Billiard balls. Hylett invented plastic in order to win a $10,000 at the time prize to replace ivory billiard balls. A prize, by the way, which he never received because the company never thought anybody would actually get it done. The celluloid balls were cheaper and more uniform than the balls that were made from ivory tusks at the time, but they were different. Players awfully ignored the new plastic balls in favor of the old traditional ones, and billiard halls often ignored them as the cheap option to actual real ivory balls. This is important to remember for later in the video. Plastics themselves were originally the cheap, terrible option, just kind of similarly to how today cheap toys are the way that 3D printing is breaking back into mass production printing. But anyway, plastic eventually worked out. In 1907, Bakelite was invented. Its first application: insulators. At the time, the world was electrifying, and the ability for plastic to both not conduct electricity and then not easily catch fire was really useful right about now when people were figuring this stuff out. It was also way easier to work with than things like glass, because it's really tough to stamp a phone out of glass and also make sure that people don't break it. So plastic ended up becoming the default material for electrical devices as the world was electrifying. Radios, phones, a lot of them ended up being made from Bakelite. And it grew even more during World War II, where due to metal shortages, plastic was a cheaper and more plentiful alternative. And then it continued to grow, as we're all aware. There was $1.2 trillion of plastic things made in 2021. Much of that was made with injection molding. And by the way, can we give injection molding a little bit of credit here? Not a lot, but a little. The way this works is very simple and very fundamental. With a mold, you have a block of metal. You then heat up some plastic back in the back, you shoot it into the mold, and when you pull it apart, a finished part falls out. It is really quite efficient and is an excellent way for reducing the cost of final parts for customers and end users. Rather than having clay bowls that are spun up, you have plastic bowls that are cheap enough that everybody can get a hold of them. And it's all at a fraction of the cost. Plastics combined with molding have improved the lives of billions of people on this planet. Think about the simple water bottle. About 15 grams of plastic is able to contain enough water to keep a human alive for a day. And that bottle can survive heat, it can survive cold, it can survive in your backpack, and it can survive at a disaster area. What is even more amazing is that plastics are a byproduct. Plastics come as a side effect of energy production. Sure, plastics are made from the oil output that we drill for, but we drill for oil to make energy, not to make plastic. Plastics only compose about 5% of the production from oil that is used. So this incredibly useful thing that's fundamental to life is a byproduct of the energy we create to get to work and raise people out of poverty. Plastics are really truly amazing just as a material too. Their properties are really incredible, but we don't have time to go fully into that because we're still supposed to be talking about 3D printing. But there is a fundamental invention that I skipped over in 1988. In 1988, plastics were extruded in layers in order to create the very first FDM 3D printer. Scott Crump, who would eventually go on to found Stratasys, was toying around with a hot glue gun trying to build a frog for his daughter. And he realized that microchips and everything else had come along, microcontrollers, all of this had come along far enough to where he could probably make a machine that would do the same thing. In 1992, Stratasys had been formed and they released the 3D Modeler, which was the first commercially available FDM 3D printer that sold anywhere from a few dozen to a few hundred units. We don't really know. We tried looking, we asked Twitter, we researched as deep as we could go. We couldn't get in contact with anybody who actually knew the sales numbers of this. So if you do know, comment down below in this video. But why is FDM so important? Well, very simply, it's just the best way of making parts. The way FDM works is a lot like the way you would make those snake pots in grade school. You know, you would roll out clay and then you coil it into a pot. thought? FDM works exactly the same way, except instead of making a simple circle, you can make the outline shape of any object that you want. And if you want that object to become more and more refined, you just roll the snake out thinner and thinner. It's like increasing the resolution on a display. And you can keep on going smaller and smaller. Today, the extrusions, which is what we call the snake, are about as thick as a human hair. And if you want those pieces to be stronger, all you have to do is add more material on the inside, basically a structure like a grid that's a scaffold inside of it. But the reason FDM is so special compared to all of the other 3D printing processes is because it uses everything that came before it. It needs no new inventions to work. It's able to use the plastic that has had 100 years worth of development to create plastic parts the way people need them to work and be, in a way that's never really been possible before. But there's a few other things that we're also gonna go over here. And the thing is, if you design a product to be made well with FDM 3D printing, you can design it to where it comes off the machine and be fully complete and ready to go into a box, which isn't really possible with other 3D printing tech that has to be dedusted or cleaned off or whatever else. So FDM is just kind of the perfect evolution of where plastics manufacturing has come from, building on thermoplastics up to this best way of manipulating them. Now, something that people complain about is the speed of FDM 3D printing. A part like this can take anywhere from a few minutes to an hour to produce, while a molding machine can create a similar sort of a part in a few seconds, though at the same time, not this part, because this part is actually unmoldable. Different video. But this is the difference. The machine that made this could cost as little as $100. This machine costs $100,000. But if it takes an hour to make one of these, you can go ahead and get 1,000 3D printers for the cost of the molding machine, and then you're making 1,000 of these per hour, which is a similar, if not better, production rate than mini molding machines. So printing can match the quality, reliability, and scale of injection molding. You just need a lot of them. But 3D printing comes with superpowers that have never existed before. First, you never need a mold. You don't have that upfront cost anymore. That means that the cost of creating a product drops from $10,000 to $100,000 to get your first part down to like $100 or the cost of a 3D printer, or basically free if you use something like a service that can just produce the part on demand for you. This is super underappreciated, by the way. 3D printing is kind of a perfect manufacturing process. If you design it right, a part can come off of a printer and be fully complete. That means that you just put in the material to make the part and the energy to change that material into the part. Nothing more. Machining has waste by the very nature of the process, subtractive cutting away from a block of aluminum. Molding, at the very least, has the mold. Printing is perfect. Next, printing is a digital process. If you use molding, you are literally setting your design into stone. There's no changing or modifying it without a bunch of expense added on. But printing lets you move as quickly as you like and iterate on your product as if it was pushing a new color for a button on an app. And by the way, there are a whole bunch of other advantages of 3D printing that we talk about in other videos. Everything from production being closer to waste being a whole lot less because you just don't overproduce. But the main things are the fact that printing is able to give you full control without any real upfront cost to where it is dropped to zero. Okay, so you have this magical process that costs nothing to get started, but needs a ton of machines in order to get to scale. And this is where we come to why we need to build about 1.5 million machines. There is $1 trillion of plastic parts made each year. Today, 3D printing is an obvious choice for manufacturing parts, but people don't really recognize it as an obvious choice. In my day job, you would not believe the number of conversations that I have with engineers who will say something along the lines of, yeah, 3D printing won't work. My neighbor Jerry showed me one of his parts and it wasn't that good. All due respect to those guys, but when my neighbor comes over showing me his chair woodworking project, I don't compare it to either someone who's a professional chair maker or a chair factory. So why do we do this with printing? The reason is humans. We are just that way. Also, by the way, have fun in the comments of this video, because it's gonna be glorious. But in all fairness, one of the big problems with printing has been scale. All the other issues have been solved, but the scale has been a bottleneck that hasn't really been cleared until the last several years with large print farms like ours that have multiple thousands of machines. Trillions of dollars worth of parts are gonna require a whole bunch more machines to actually be a significant part of the production. So we're starting small with a very simple metric. Amazon ships 1.6 million packages per day in the United States alone. By the way, Amazon is a tiny fraction of the number of things that are made in the world all the time. But this is a good place to start. In our giant print farm, parts are made, processed, packed, and shipped directly to customers in as little as 1 day. That means that for us to match Amazon, we basically need to build the round number of 1.5 million 3D printers, at least. Because by the way, Amazon actually ships about 26 million packages per day, and not all those packages have one item inside of them. So what does this all look like? Building out this number of printers, what does that take? Well, our Boise Mega Farm is spec'd out for 3,000 machines. That means that we only need to build about 500 more of these. But oddly enough, there are about 500 major cities in the world that have more than 1 million people inside of them, to where you will have enough demand in that area to have those print farms there. So we can build print farms in the highest demand areas around the world. This is a fantastic opportunity. 3D printing costs nothing to start. So new products can be created for free by anyone in the world, as easily as someone would learn to make an app. So you eliminate the cost to create for inventors. So more amazing and varied products can be made around the world that are more intentional and loved and useful. And there is less waste from the toys and products that people are making, because there's just not overproduction or just extraneous waste. And with giant print farms in every major city around the world, you eliminate shipping and warehousing and all the carbon emissions that come from those. It creates in a world where efficiency is standard and invention is enabled in a way that was never possible before. When I grew up, if you wanted to invent something, you already had to be rich. You had to have $100,000, you fly to China, you buy a mold, you ship it across here, you store thousands of parts inside of a warehouse and then hope they sell. And you swing for the fences, and when you probably fail, you end up going out of business and going back to doing whatever you were doing. From the work that we have done, anyone is now able to access and use 1,000 3D printers for free for whatever their business or idea might be. But now we need to take it to 1 million. And the creations only get better every day. Last year, Wiglets started selling through Target. Scott Ujan is a YouTuber who has created amazing products that break the mold of what people expect from 3D printing. And there are so many other people creating amazing things with this new process that is now starting to scale up and be really useful. Zellerfeld is making one of Nike's flagship branded shoes with 3D printing. And we have been making millions of parts for creators all over the world. But now it's time to break the mold, literally. Have a great day, everybody.